You are listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding, combating stigma since 2021. I wanted there to be a podcast about hoarding disorder from somebody who hoarded rather than a professional. That didn't exist, so I created it. And that's this podcast that you're listening to now. Subscribe to the podcast and find my social media links, episode transcripts, and every link that I mention at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. Finally, I am not a doctor. I'm just a hoarder doing her best. So do seek professional support if and when you need it. This episode is sponsored by Cambridge University Press, publisher of Dr. Lynn Drummond's new book, Everything You Need to Know About Hoarding. Struggling with hoarding disorder, feeling ashamed or guilty about your belongings and afraid to let them go is more common than you might think, affecting up to 6% of the general population. But despite its prevalence, seeking help can be challenging. This new book provides a clear description of hoarding, exploring it as a symptom of other issues as well as a condition in its own right. You'll learn about different treatment options and find step-by-step guidance and tools for recovery in the self-help section. Personal narratives and case studies make this guide accessible and relatable for those affected by hoarding, as well as their loved ones and health professionals. Don't let hoarding disorder control your life. Take the first step towards recovery today with this invaluable resource. Everything you need to know about hoarding is out in the UK now. Buy your copy at cambridge.org/everythinghoarding and get 20% off with the discount code HOARDING20. So I am here with Carrie Lagerstedt from Curate Home in Wellington, New Zealand. So you can expect some interesting vowels. Carrie is a professional home organiser and specialises in working particularly with neurodiverse people, including people with ADHD and autism. She helps people to declutter and also set up systems in their home that work rather than just clearing things out and expecting them to be fine from there. I first got to know Carrie via her Instagram account, which is thoroughly entertaining. And I'm really happy that she agreed to come on the podcast to talk about ADHD, executive dysfunction, and how we can set up our homes to work for us. Carrie, how are you?
I'm really good. Thank you so much for having me on.
You're very welcome. So how did you get into this career, first of all? How did you end up an organiser?
Oh, that's a really good question. I came to organising from teaching. I have been a teacher for over a decade. I would say that really my whole career has been based around education, helping people. I worked with mental health and disability. Yeah, so I guess I've always been a caring person. One evening I was over at a friend's place and I was just ripping apart her wardrobe, helping her declutter. And, kind of talking about how I wanted a career change. And she looked at me and she said, well, why don't you do this? You're quite good at this. There's this lady, Marie Kondo, and I think the home edit was really starting to kick off. That was 4 years ago now. And it's just sort of taken on a life of its own.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So thinking of neurodivergence in particular, what are some of the common issues you see that link neurodivergence with clutter or chronic disorganisation?
So I'd say a big one is out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
And then very much the opposite of, oh, I must remember that, and so I'll leave it in sight. I would say that it is the sensory overwhelm of clutter and how that just wears us down and really kind of adds to our mental load and does affect our executive functioning because of that sensory overwhelm, that visual overwhelm. And then, obviously like the executive function or executive dysfunctioning in itself, which is our inability ability to kind of harness those skills that help us to like manage a project such as decluttering or dehoarding. Yeah, problems with executive functioning really hamper and are a challenge to, keeping a house in a functional state or even a quote unquote tidy state.
Yeah. So you have ADHD yourself. How does that help you when you're working with clients?
Ooh, I would say, I couldn't do, it's really interesting because I've worked with people who have neurodivergences my whole life or my whole career. And yet I was only diagnosed in 2020. So I think we had this natural connection, this natural sort of affinity, but I couldn't work with people who have neurodiversities or say that I am an expert or specialize in working with people with neurodiversity if I don't have that lived experience. And you can only gain trust from someone if you don't have that survivorship bias. Like if I were a client of mine, I would say, well, who is this woman coming in and telling me how she's going to help me make my life easier? I come in and say, well, I understand. I am an organized person. I'm not a tidy person. And people find that quite shocking. They're like, but you're a professional organizer. Your house must be so like neat and tidy. I'm like, no, I'm messy. But then again, I've developed the strategies that like I can tidy up my house quickly or make it functional relatively easily with less stress, anxiety. Yeah, so it's really just about, like I say, it's about that lived experience. It's about saying like, I'm here alongside you.
Yeah, I get how your brain works because mine works in a similar way.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
And especially, it's such a vulnerable thing to invite somebody into your home, especially to invite somebody into your home to help you with your mess or to help you with some chaos.
Yeah.
And so anything that can help to build that trust, I would imagine, is really valuable.
Mm-hmm. I would say like especially having ADHD or being neurodivergent because we have constantly throughout our lives heard those, had those stories thrown at us of, like, you're lazy. Why can't you just do it? Why can't you just try harder?
And people saying, oh, no, you just do it like this. And it's like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I can't.
I think what I'm quite passionate about is figuring out what aspects you find challenging and then finding creative ways to overcome that in order to get the result that you want. And a big part of what I do is, and I love this term, I love Casey Davis, like absolute goddess, because she just changed the game. She really she actually helped me form the foundation or the philosophy of how I organize because it's about functionality, it's about moral neutrality. Like if I
Yes.
walk into your house and it is like chronically disorganized, I love to use the word functional because that's all it needs to be.
Yeah.
You don't need my judgment on whether you're a good person or whether being tidy is good.
Mm.
You want your house to be different. You want your house to be functional. I'm going to ask you some questions around how we get there. Like what are the challenges that you're facing and how can we overcome that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, Casey's absolutely a game changer. For anyone who doesn't know, I interviewed her on this podcast. She interviewed me on her podcast. And yeah, the moral neutrality thing is so important that we're not in
Mhm.
this situation because we're bad people or bad,
Mhm.
it's, yeah, it doesn't, it's not an issue of morals and ethics.
That's right.
It's an issue of overwhelm, or it's an issue of grief, or it's an issue of any number of things.
Mhm. One of my favorite things to say to my clients who are feeling like that is, I just think there's no such thing as laziness. Laziness is a word that society has used to describe executive dysfunction.
And to describe not being sufficiently workery under a capitalist system.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Are
Yeah.
you producing enough for capitalism?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I think both of those, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I really like to kind of unpick that social stigma, the social expectation, or, like, are you changing this because you feel obligated to? That obligation's only making you feel awful or not good enough or bad. Whereas if you simply want to make your home functional, then that's again, it's morally neutral. And man, that's the term is just such a game changer.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
lets you be compassionate to yourself.
Yeah, something I'm working on with myself is stopping talking about earning rest or deserving rest.
Yeah,
Just rest is a thing we might need or want,
absolutely.
and we don't have to justify it somehow.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Rest is morally neutral.
Rest is morally neutral and
Yeah.
delicious.
Yes.
So let's talk about neurodivergent people making their homework for them rather than the other way round.
Mhm.
Could you tell me what you mean by that, first of all? What does that mean to you in your work?
Okay. Well, I think it's about change. If you're going to change something because it's not working, as ADHD, I find myself and the people around me being very aspirational. And so it's kind of like those other aspirational things that we do, like going on a diet or going to the gym or New Year's resolutions. We're so aspirational. And I just think you can try and change yourself or you can change the environment. And the thing is, willpower is finite. And again, this is a very ADHD thing. If I just try harder, then that's the solution. It is not the solution. Like, why would you spend all this energy and anguish and money and time just trying harder when you can change your environment? There's this amazing quote by James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits. I haven't read it, I'm not going to, but I love this quote. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And that just underpins what I do because, again, we've been told all of our lives just to try harder. So we apply that to our homes and think, oh, I should just try harder. So you try harder, you fail because whatever, life. And therefore, you must be a bad person because you didn't try hard enough. That's not a solution. That's not productive in anyone's realm. So when you change your environment and life becomes a little bit easier, you're using less brain power to simply get through the day. And then you're gonna use that on more fun things, or you're gonna use that brain power for something greater than just existing in your home. Like I just think it's our home's job to work for us, not the other way around.
Like, I feel like a really small example is that I had a pot on my kitchen windowsill where I had all my utensils, wooden spoons, ladles, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so every time I cooked, I was having to go from the cooker to the windowsill, to the cooker to the windowsill, to the cooker to the windowsill. And I did that for a good year before thinking, if the utensils lived next to the cooker, that would be a much easier way to cook than having to cross the kitchen every time. And it's like a really small thing, but it strikes me as the more of those small things we can fix, the less kind of onerous it is to just do the basics, never mind anything beyond that.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. And imagine your life being a series of having to take an extra step. In that example, it's very literal, but I will use the concept of taking an extra step quite figuratively. Like, quite often it means opening a door or moving a box. I don't know if it's an easy mindset change to make, but when you can look at your surroundings and reflect on, just those tiny little reflections like, oh, the utensil jar could sit closer and that would make my life easier. When you have that moment of reflection throughout the day and say, is there a way that I can make this more fluid? Is there a way that I can actually just make this work better for me? That is when you are just reaching like self-actualization in your home. Like whether you live in a hoard or whether you live in chronic disorganization, you can just make those little micro reflections, little micro steps towards making your life easier. And I just think that's it's just so satisfying. That's a game changer.
Like any independent podcaster, I rely to some degree on my listeners. If you are able to donate to help to ensure the future of this pretty unique project, you can do so at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/donate. If you are not able to, I appreciate you listening and enjoying regardless. Thank you. Because you and I were talking the other day about habituation, weren't we?
Yes.
And those things, Jan and I did an episode on it a while ago. I will link to that in the show notes. But that thing where you stop seeing the things around you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I might spend weeks stepping over a box instead of ever thinking to move the box.
Yeah.
So I guess some of kind of setting up these systems is noticing, like being really conscious about noticing where your blocks are in the first place.
Yes, that's right. It is, absolutely. And I think that coming back to understanding the executive functions and how they can challenge us can sort of underpin that. Today, I washed a load of laundry for the third time. And I was getting really hacked off with myself because I'm like, this is ridiculous. 3 times I've had to rewash this load of laundry. And I had to think, what is the block? Why am I not hanging my laundry out? I live in an apartment. My washing line is literally directly behind my washing machine. It's not that I had to go outside or whatever. And so I thought to myself, I'm going to reflect, again, all within a matter of seconds. What's actually stopping me? What is stopping me? And it was quite simply that there was still dry washing on the line. And so I'm like, okay, cool, that is the block. So I took the dry washing off the line. And then it was much easier to hang out the load of laundry, finally. But it's those little moments where you stop and think, hang on a minute. Yeah, again, what is the block? And quite often when I walk into a home with organization that's not functional, it might look like somebody has just kind of shoved an item into any nook and cranny space that there is. And what you're doing is trying to, complete the task, but you can't for whatever reason. And so I will look at that with fresh eyes and say, well, why couldn't that person put it away? And it might be that it was a step too far to open the door and then open the box, put the item in the box, close the door. That's far too many steps. So for that person, I might set up a system that is like an open basket with no lid on top. So you can just open the door, throw it in, and it's done. Because the challenge for them, the barrier is too many steps, too many steps to putting the thing away, or there might be too many items in the box. So okay, cool, we're going to declutter it.
The what's the block question is a really powerful question. I use it all the time. I either word it as what's the block, or
Mm.
if sometimes I have like a giant internal nope.
Yeah.
Just whatever it is, just nope. And so in that
Yeah.
case, it's a what kind of nope is it?
Yes.
And sometimes, so they're the two ways I ask myself that question. And there can be something I've had a block about for weeks or months. And the moment I ask myself that and spend a few seconds on it, I go, oh, it's that. And I know how to, like, oh, no, that's an overwhelm nope. And then I'm like, okay, I know overwhelm. I know that what I need to do when I'm overwhelmed is break it into smaller,
Yes.
but until I ask myself that question directly, I just spend months going nope at it and never explore it further. But as soon as I ask myself and identify it, it's nearly always something with a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think I probably learned that from you.
What can I say? I'm very wise.
Like I would say, along with Casey Davis, you've been such a huge influence on my philosophy for organizing, and and the way that I set up systems. But it's absolutely that reflection and just saying, well, let's just take a minute and explore this. And like quite often, as you say, being curious. And what is that? Why is this happening? Or yeah, what is the block? And again, I think we can bring that back to our executive dysfunction, because like, what is the block?
So you've mentioned executive functioning a few times and executive dysfunction. What kinds of blocks and difficulties do your clients and indeed you tend to face in terms of executive functioning?
I would say a big one is working memory, and that can be quite hilarious in the moment. um, a hack that I use quite often is just post-its, because we will quite often just sit on the floor and really kind of spread out what we're working with, and then put it into piles or into boxes. And I use post-it notes to label those, because about 5 minutes in, both my client and I have forgotten which pile is which bag is recycling, which bag is trash. So you've really just got to not rely on your working memory.
And if you know that that's like a weak point for yourself, build in from the start hacks to address it rather than keep going, oh, this time I'll remember when you won't.
Exactly. You won't. Exactly. And again, it comes back to that like aspirational thinking, or just trying harder, just willing yourself to remember. You will not remember. Why do you tell yourself that you can, when there are tools out there to help us? I I have just had to train myself to be really obsessive using my calendar and reminders, because I will not remember. And again, that doesn't make me a bad person. Some other executive functions that I work alongside daily are cognitive flexibility. And that can really show up as, I'd say, like all or nothing thinking. It can be quite sort of defeatist thinking. I'll kind of throw out, I'm very creative in my solutions and sometimes unorthodox. And I'll say, okay, so how about we do this? And my client will say, well, yeah, but then XYZ. And then XYZ, and then that's going to happen, and that's going to happen. Okay, but we're not going to get a perfect solution. Like we have to aim for done, not perfect. We have to, yeah. An imperfect solution is still better than no solution.
Absolutely.
And that can be really hard to accept.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And also something that honestly, it took me a while to work out. And I feel like this is one of those things that most people were told at some point, but I missed the memo. And that was that if you put something somewhere, that doesn't have to be where it lives for the rest of your life.
Oh.
If you put something somewhere and it doesn't quite work, you can put it somewhere else. And that took
Yeah.
me an embarrassingly long time to learn.
No, I think there's two sides to that, because your brain is really counting on the fact that your brain is counting on that muscle memory. So it's counting on the fact that it's always there.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of neurodiversity in there as well, just but like you say, that's the cognitive flexibility, right? That's just saying, like, here is what it is. Yeah, and I have had people get upset about the idea of changing where something lives, simply because that is where it has always lived, and I'll absolutely respect that. Again, it's got to work for you.
Yeah.
One hack that I like to put in place for those clients, or clients that really aren't going to remember the new spot, is you leave breadcrumbs, right? Like, you, again, post-it notes, pop a little post-it note saying, your handbags now live in the second drawer down of the cupboard in the second bedroom. Just leave yourself a little note telling you where the new location is, because, again, like, don't rely on your working memory.
And so when you can help a client to set up a system, and that what we're not going to do, what I always try and avoid on the podcast, is saying the system you should set up is, because that's not how we work. That's not how our homes work. It's not how our brains work. It's not how our families work. So it's about finding systems that work for me, or work for you, or work for the person listening.
That's right.
And I think a lot of people with a lot of clutter are more resourceful than we think. And I think a lot of us are quite creative people. But working out what the best system might be is quite hard, especially if you've always done it a certain way, or you're overwhelmed, or you just feel stuck. How do you help somebody work out, okay, currently you're doing this 5-step process every day. How can we get that down to 2 steps?
It's a really good question. I use the visual cues of what I can see quite a lot. I will use my own bedroom as an example, because I will admit it is frustratingly imperfect. I've, and I say I've always been messy, legendarily messy. And so now I still just throw my clothes over a chair, and quite often on the ground. So you can see that is the habit that I have. The challenge that I have is I hate hanging things up. I don't know why. Quite often people prefer to hang things up than to fold them and put them away.
Mm-hmm.
But if that was a client, I would say, right, I can see that you don't like I can see that you aren't putting your clothes away. What is behind that? Why is that? And then, again, if I were the client, I'd say, well, it's because I don't like hanging them up. And it might take a little bit more kind of like pulling at threads to get that realization or that answer. I don't like hanging things up. Why don't you like hanging things up? I'm not quite sure. I feel like there's just too many steps involved. So I'd say, well, how do we, like you say, how do we limit the steps? I've got a client who very proudly installed S-hooks on a dress rail that is not inside the wardrobe. So there you go. She's eliminated the door. She's eliminated part of the process of having to hang something on a coat hanger. Like, think about how many steps it takes you to do something, whether those are literal steps like you and your utensil jar, or movements, or thought pattern. It's being reflective and really kind of almost like an occupational therapist might look at a person's environment or their actions and say, how can we do this differently? Yeah.
So there can be benefit in maybe like taking a step back and trying to be quite neutral about what you're doing and
Yes.
thinking maybe, yeah, if I was going to do this differently, what other options would I have?
Yeah.
Yeah, different ways of asking yourself the same question, maybe,
Yeah.
to try and get to, okay, that's what the block is, or these are the 3 blocks. How can I eliminate
Mm.
one or all of those and just make it less? It's interesting. My friend who knows about the podcast
Mm.
listened to an old episode a while ago, and we were messaging, and I was taking stuff out of the washing machine as we were messaging. And they said, oh, I just listened to an old episode where you said that you were really good at putting the laundry on, but really bad at hanging the things out to dry.
Yeah.
And so it's quite interesting that we're messaging as you're getting things out of the machine. And as we talked about it, I realized, and I'd kind of forgotten this, that at the time I made that episode, in my head, when I put things in the machine, the laundry was done. When I turned the machine on, that was the
Oh.
task complete.
Ah.
And so taking it out felt like a whole new thing that I wasn't prepared for.
That is so interesting.
Yeah. And somehow in the time since making that episode to now, I still hate hanging things out to dry. I hate it.
Mhm.
But somehow in my head, I've incorporated it as the same task.
Yes.
So I'm not marking it as complete in my brain
That's
until
good.
things are hanging out to dry.
That's really good. Yeah.
So sometimes that kind of shifting the way you think about an everyday task can make it look different. And that can then, like the whole seeing it through fresh eyes thing.
Yes.
Sometimes if you take a photo of your room, you might see things that you wouldn't see otherwise. And I think we
Yeah.
can do the same a bit with tasks as well.
Yes.
Just try and look at it with fresh eyes and think, is this the most efficient way of doing this?
Absolutely. That's right. And it's so much of it. It's just fresh eyes is that reflection and that curiosity and saying like, huh, how what are my beliefs around this? Because your belief was, and now the task is done.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do I think about this? Is it, oh, I'm always so bad at remembering to hang out the washing? Or again, how can we hack that? I I've literally got clients that I work with to hack that exact issue. So their laundry is in an outhouse in a different part of the house, and she never hears it beeping at her. So she never remembers to hang out the washing. And so you kind of think, all right, that's the barrier, that's the challenge. How are we going to overcome it? What hacks can we use? And I don't know if we ever found the perfect solution, but I was like, hey, chuck an Alexa in there and get it to listen out for the laundry and tell you when it's done, or set a reminder on your phone for set a timer on your phone for like 45
Yeah.
minutes. Or yeah, so it's really just about like that reflection, saying what is the barrier here, and what do I need that I can use that is like outside of ourselves. Like we live in this amazing time where we have everything at our fingertips to be productive and be whatever capitalism wants us to be. So we have all these productive, we have these productivity tools. Like let's bloody well use them.
Yeah. There's a lot asked of us in the modern world from every corner. And if something can help, let it help us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier the difficulty, like the 2 layers of difficulties with the out of sight, out of mind issue. And
Hmm.
one layer of that difficulty is that people feel the need to keep things out so they don't forget. And the other layer of that difficulty is if we put something in a bag or a box, it's gone forever. How do you work with people on those things?
There's multiple ways of attacking that problem and kind of unraveling it. In the process of decluttering a room or organizing a room or a doom pile or a doom room, I'll have a to-do box. And if somebody comes up against something like that, like, oh, that cup, I need to glue the handle back on, I'll say, put it in the to-do box. And you can even, once again, I'm not sponsored by Post-it, but you can write on a post-it the action that needs to be taken, glue handle back on, or that's where that freaking library books. That's where that library book is. I need to return it. Put it on the to-do box. And it's literally just a cardboard box with the words to do on it. But then once you've finished decluttering, you can take that box, keep it at the front door. I don't know, you might just start to ignore it. But again, imperfect solutions. And that's going to keep you on track, but it's going to keep you, it categorizes the to-do, and you know that it's there when you need to go and look for it. The other way to unfurl that is just by categorizing. Honestly, categorizing, I feel, is just the secret. It's just a secret to the universe. Categorizing is everything, because you might forget that object exists, but you don't forget that the category exists. Well, you shouldn't, because you should just label it. But it's harder to forget that an entire category exists. Like, say, your favorite writing pen, say that keeps getting lost because your house is like a hoard or chronically disorganized. If you have a box of pens, and again, it can just be a cardboard box, every time you know you need a pen, you go look in the pen box. You're like, oh, hello, my favorite pen.
That has the added benefit of when you put like with like, it, for me, and I know for other people, if I'm then in the shop and there's a beautiful pen and it's really reduced, I can picture, okay, I've got like 45 pens in one place. I really, really, really don't need the new one. And also, when you've got your 45 pens in one place, it is easier to get rid of a few.
Yeah.
Because you can see in front of you, okay, I don't need this, but nobody needs this many pens.
Yeah, absolutely. And that totally comes back to like your working memory, right? Because if you are just coming across pen, 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 you're going to say, oh, it's a pen, I have to get the pen. Oh, it's a pen, I have to get the pen. But when you bring them all together, when you categorize, you don't need to rely on your working memory. Did I just declutter a pen 5 minutes ago, or did I keep it? Oh God, I can't remember. Oh, well, I better keep this one.
Yeah.
So that's another really simple way to just like jettison the amount of thinking that you have to do.
Yes. I'm a big fan of reducing the amount of thinking, like kind of almost mentally automating certain things. Like for me, an absolute rule is that if food is out of date, it goes.
Yeah.
I am a metaphobic. I do not eat out of date things. Even if you're not a metaphobic, you deserve to eat fresh food and not out of date food. So because that's a really firm rule for me, it's not that I enjoy throwing out of date food, but I don't have to make a decision because that's just the rule. And reducing the number of decisions we have to make on a daily basis helps with exhaustion, really.
Yes, but I mean, we were never designed to be making this many decisions per day. So when you can, and again, that's another executive dysfunction hack, right? Because decision making is an executive function. So create yourself a framework, and for you, what you've done is the framework is out of date food goes out, and because that is your framework, you don't have to use up your mental energy making that decision every time.
Yeah.
And so, like, hypothetically, you can say, I'm only going to keep blue pens in my house,
Yeah.
or, like blue ink pens. So therefore, if it is black, if it is red, if it is purple, it goes out. And I don't, I don't think anybody should be throwing out pens based on the color, but it's an example.
Yeah, and like keeping only clothes that fit is not a bad rule to have.
Absolutely. I love that.
Or if that's too scary, anything that's, say, 2 sizes away can go
Yeah.
as your rule.
Yeah.
And maybe you're too anxious to not get rid of one size up and one size down, like whatever, start with
Hmm.
bigger than that. But it just reduces that constant, okay, what do I think of this? Oh, but it's green. Do I have another green one? Even though it fit 3 years ago and doesn't now.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about how you help people who, when they put something away, it just disappears from their brain. Like storage
Hmm.
wise, I know some people advocate like just not having doors on things so you can always see what's there, or using like clear boxes instead of cardboard boxes, for instance, so you know what you're looking at.
Hmm.
Do you have any other hacks around that?
I think that categorizing helps that,
Again, yeah.
because there are three types of people. There's I I just call it raised earth, people who just need absolute minimalism, just bare bare benches, bare tables, nothing, no clutter, nothing, nothing, nothing. And it's not because they think they're a minimalist or whatever. It's because the visual overwhelm, because every item is obligation, every item is a job, every item is a to-do, it's a
Yeah.
visual to-do list.
Yeah.
Clutter is a visual to-do list. So those people want to not see anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I've got other people who need to see
Yeah.
everything and say, if it goes behind a door, it's gone. It
Yeah.
never existed. And then there are people who want both.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how? And that's the most common. I'm like, I don't know how to do that for you. So again, like labeling, categorizing can be the secret to that.
I'm going to guess that 80% of people listening have a label maker.
Yeah, at least one.
At
At least
least
one.
one. I have two. I have an upstairs one and a downstairs one.
Like that's a system that works for you. There you go.
Yeah, it saves me losing it between the two.
Yep. Uniformity is also an important, underappreciated aspect of organizing. And I've got to say this is something that the home edit does do well, because when your eye sees uniformity, it's not it's not pausing, it's not thinking. Your brain has less information to translate. And so quite often, simply putting something in a pile or a straight line is more calming to your brain. So even if you can't get it into a box or put it behind a closed door, even just very simple things like thinking, how can I make this uniform, can just create a little bit more calm.
There is some ADHD advice out there that feels, on the one hand, like it makes a lot of sense to me, and on the other hand, like it would work against people who hoard or who are chronically disorganized.
Mm.
And that is actually, the label maker is a good example of, if you keep forgetting to put deodorant on when you're in the bathroom, just keep some deodorant in every room, and then wherever you are, when you remember, you can put it on.
Mm.
And that makes a lot of sense to me, and also is a really difficult thing to balance, because there's a contradiction between things that help with one area of life, which is forgetting to put the
Mm.
deodorant on in the bathroom, but not the other, which is trying to reduce excess clutter. Is that something you come across?
Yes, I would say that it is. And it's definitely a tricky one to balance, because it's a catch-22, right? If there were
Mm.
not so many items in your home, then you would have less visual overwhelm, which would lead to less mental overwhelm, which would, like, again, like free up the brain space, free up your executive functioning for the thing that you want to remember to do. But on the other hand, it's a system that works for you. Maybe they can kind of work hand in hand. Yeah, that's a tricky one. I am definitely a roll-on forgetter. So I do have one. I keep it in my handbag. That's just because I usually put it on in the car. That's my routine. And then I think there is a spare one in the car for if the handbag one runs out. Yeah, but I think overall life is easier when your brain is not translating so much visual information. Your executive functioning is not stolen. Your mental load, your mental capability is not being used up by visually translating everything around you. And that frees up a little bit of brain space to think, what was I doing?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So kind of improving the overall situation and your environment will help to reduce that kind of forgetting or losing things.
Yeah. And I just it's a really sucky answer because that's the hard answer. That's the low dopamine answer. That's the hard work answer. Nobody wants to hear that.
No.
Yeah.
But sometimes the low dopamine answers are the answer.
I think they so often are. So often are. But that's what gets us into this in the first place, right? Is no, it's a very low dopamine task, and I'm going to avoid it because it feels almost physically painful to do the things that I don't want to do.
Yeah, yeah. If you've been wondering how you can support the podcast, there are more ways than just by donating. It really, really helps if you leave a review, share the podcast with your friends or on social media, link to the podcast from your website, or just follow me on social media and send me the occasional hi. Find out more at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support. Have you used any hacks on yourself today?
Yeah, hanging out the washing, that was definitely one of them.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Another hack that I like to use is I like to use May as well because I think I'm a little bit PDA, which is pervasive drive for autonomy, or also known as
Pathological demand avoidance.
Thank you. Okay, so I just have a touch of PDA, which is pathological demand avoidant or pervasive drive for autonomy. The feeling of being made to do something that is beyond my own choosing, or that freedom to choose to do something, is very suffocating. And so instead of the old trope, which is just do it now, which is very aggressive, it is just aggressive. I think I may as well. And the amount of time that it's going to take me to write something on my to-do list, well, that's an instruction. It's an obligation. So instead of writing it on my to-do list, I think may as well. It's going to take me. It was sent an email. I had to send an email and say, hey, can I, engage your services? Oh, for God's sakes, Carrie, I may as well just send the email. And again, reflecting on that and thinking to myself, it can sit in my brain, in my mental to-do list, or literally on my physical to-do list, and be an obligation that keeps repeating. Or I can just do it. I may as well just do it. And I use that quite often when I'm very all or nothing in terms of making my space functional or tidy. I even hate the word tidy because there's so much social connotations behind it. But I think in order to keep my space calm, I may as well. I'm going to the bathroom now. I may as well take that. I'm holding on to a pair of tweezers. So I've had my tweezers at the dining room table. I may as well take my tweezers and I may as well get it one step closer to where it needs to be. That's another hack that I like to use to, again, like lessen that overwhelm from that perfectionist thinking.
Yeah.
Like I might not be able to complete the task, but I can get it one step closer to done.
That's something I find really helpful as well. Yeah.
Another one is if it's worth doing badly. So I do a lot of that. I cleaned about a quarter of my shower today, you know? And it's like I didn't I couldn't even be bothered bending down. So I just cleaned like the
Yeah.
top half of my shower. I'm like, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing badly. But it's one step closer to done. You know,
I like
3 weeks time, I might clean the bottom half. I don't know.
See how it
Yeah,
goes. May as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
What is one habit or practice that has either improved or helped you to maintain your own mental health?
Oh, I think it's moral neutrality. I don't know whether that
Mm.
is a sort of a practice, but
Yeah, that works.
yeah, it's just seeing things as stripping away the emotion. So, like for me, I'm pretty good at being late most places I go. And I had a friend who felt really offended that I had arrived late. And I said to him, I'm not late because I disrespect you. I'm late because I just have no concept of time. And I feel bad that I've let you down. And I'm sorry for that. But yeah, again, stripping away the morality of being late because he is a busy person and I had wasted his time or I had made him feel frustrated. But it didn't make me a bad person. I felt sad and apologetic because I'd made him feel bad.
Yeah.
But stripping away, again, just stripping away the way that my executive functions affect my life. Is executive dysfunction is morally neutral. I think that's a lovely way to sum it up.
Yeah. Yeah. You were late and that annoyed him. And also, you're not a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
all of that is true.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah. So I think that's really helped to improve my self-worth and self-esteem.
Good. Good. So it is extra question time
All right.
where this is the bit where I ask guests an extra question. It's sometimes a slightly silly one. And dehoarding darlings get access to this extra question and the answer. If you would like to become a dehoarding darling, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/darling. Okay, back to the pod. So, Carrie, thank you so much. It's so interesting to talk ADHD with you and also systems. This whole conversation has got me thinking about what am I overdoing that I don't need to be overdoing. And I think I'm going to go about my day a bit differently,
Yeah,
looking for opportunities to just reduce the load a bit.
absolutely. Streamline it. Yeah,
Streamline, word of the week.
absolutely. Yeah.
So, if people want to find out more about what you do, want to get in touch, where is one place they can do that?
One place people can find me on the internet is probably, I would say I'm most active on Instagram. Just absolutely ridiculous. I just clearly have no shame.
Your Instagram is fun. I am a big fan.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so check me out on Instagram, Curate Home NZ on Instagram.
Marvellous. And I will also link to your website from my website as well. Carrie, thank you so much. That's been great.
And it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
It's the bit where that hoarder shouts out someone wise.
Shout out today to friend of the podcast, Meg Kissack, who in this little clip from an episode of her podcast, The Daily Pep, talks about finding hope in dark times. Have a listen.
So today feels like a really good day to talk about rebellious hope. It often feels like the world is going to hell in a handbasket. And I don't know about you, but I often struggle with clinging on to any semblance of hope and also feeling pretty powerless. But one of the things I keep returning back to is the fact that having hope is a rebellious act because it takes courage to imagine better and believe in better, and courage to imagine a brighter future when the future doesn't look too shiny. Hope is also rebellious because too many people benefit from our despair. And while despair is a very, very valid reaction to so much going on in the world right now, it also really robs us of our one wild and precious life and robs us of our power. And that always makes me think of the Anita Roddick quote, where she says, if you think you're too small to have an impact, try going to bed with a mosquito in the room.
Okay, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you next time. Thank you for listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you on board. You can find all the links I've mentioned and a transcript of the episode online at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. To find out more about how you can support this podcast and the overall project, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support and do subscribe to the podcast so you make sure you don't miss any future episodes. There may be links in this podcast that earn me money. This doesn't come at any extra cost to you if you make a purchase through those links, and it helps to support the podcast. What are some of the common issues you see that link one to the other?
Oh, no, you'll have to repeat the question. Sorry.
No problem.
Totally missed it. Working memory. Okay, sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
It's coming back to me. One minute. What are some other executive functions? Hang on, I've got it written down over here. I took some notes. I feel like I'm talking lots.
You're meant to be. It's good. That's why you're here.
Cool. Good. Thanks.
No, you're talking the perfect amount. Not that perfection is the goal.
Oh, yeah. Good point.